welcome to another in our series of Advising Brown Bag Colloquia. Today we have Dr. Norma Boakes in the School of Education and Dr. Meg White in the School of Education, who are going to be talking about moving beyond course grades and GPA to measure competency. And we thank you for being here. You should know that Dr. White was the recipient of the 2016 Provost Professional Development Award in Faculty Precepting. So this project comes partly funded from that award. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The way that we would like to divide the presentation this afternoon is to get some information from you as far as how you measure competency in your own program, and then parallel that a little bit with what we do in the School of Education and how we measure competency. We, of course, as a accredited and licensed program, have to have competencies for our students who are going out to get their licensure and become teachers. So this is a process for us that we are very much used to, and hopefully out of this presentation this afternoon you will get something to be able to take back to your programs. So we'll start with a question.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing we wanted to do, and it helps the process itself, like Meg said, in the School of Education we sort of live in the world of accountability and accreditation because we have very specific things that teachers have to do for licensure. We need to make sure that they're competent in their jobs. So one of the things we wanted to do today is to give other people an opportunity. Now I know we have some School of Ed friends in the room, but there's also many others of you, but to consider what actually defines competency. Because what happens is, you know, when you think about in a higher education environment, when your students leave and they graduate, what you hope is that they'll be successful in whatever the path is that they've chosen. Right? So obviously in teacher education, we want good teachers, that's what we want. And we want them to have all of the qualities and capabilities that a new teacher would need to be successful and sustain in their careers. So what that looks like, depending on what program it is, can be different. So one of the first things we wanted to do was just to have a conversation about how you define like that competency. So what is it that makes a student competent or would be expected of them if they have a degree in, and then you fill in the blank, okay? So actually, I was kind of, what I think we'd like to do just for a minute is to have you talk a little bit, or maybe what I'll do, because one thing I'll tell you is we do have some people in the room that are quite knowledgeable about teaching. But it may actually help to think about what you got your degree in that got you here, because you obviously have careers, you're in them now. So actually, I think it might not be a bad idea, if it's okay, to find out what you got a bachelor's degree in when you were a student in your higher education, what you did. So I'm going to start with Kate. Your degree?
In psychology and then a master's in instructional technology.
Okay.
Business and psychology, specifically psychometrics.
Okay, so business psychology or psychology. Why don't we go? You want to try?
Undergrad in journalism, graduate in management.
Okay, journalism.
Undergraduate in English education, master's in English and higher education.
Lots of other stuff, but English, degree in English. Okay, we all have lots of different things, yeah. Paula?
Bachelor's and master's degree in music.
Music.
And a second master's in instructional technology.
Very nice, okay.
Industry and business, English, English linguistics.
So English linguistics?
Okay.
Okay.
French.
Random.
Inclusive elementary education, special education, and sociology for bachelor's.
All, so what were they again? There were inclusive education, special ed,
and sociology.
and sociology. Okay, all right, excellent. Jung?
Undergraduate social science education, graduate Western history, masters, and doctoral instructional technology, adult learning and technology.
Okay.
All right, and
Sorry.
everyone wants to go first. Peter, you want to go first?
English.
English. Got a couple of English people in the room, okay.
Communication sciences and disorders, special education, and a master's in social work.
Okay, all right.
So regardless of how you got here, if you think about when you graduated from any of these programs, what do you think was required of you in that field? What did you need to know in that field? Because I think we end up sometimes, as it sounds like we all ended up in a different area necessarily, but if we go back to the competencies in your program, what was it that you absolutely needed to know as you graduated from that program? Yes.
Fluency,
Fluency.
proficiency.
Okay.
So you had
Was-
to be able to use the language in context.
Yep, and you had to pass proficiency exams.
Okay.
And then also, of course, literature and all kinds of subjects related to French language and literature.
Okay.
So it was the actual use of the language, like application of it.
So that was an important part. But
Okay.
then also knowledge of culture and literature, but all in French. Everything was, all the competencies were measured in the French language.
So you not only had to know things about France and the French language, but you also had to be able to apply it.
And the coursework
All
was all
blended.
in French. So if you weren't at you know, the higher levels, so if you weren't proficient, you didn't make the grade.
Okay.
Okay. How about our degrees in English? I'm curious, like, what would you say? Now, it can be what you would expect, but I mean, one of the things is when someone sees that you have a bachelor's in English, they'll have some, you know, what will be expected, so anyone can go. Journalism's close, too. So what would you say?
I think
For
Peter and I
competency.
would both say we had to write.
Had to write.
But
I
it's,
was kind of wondering, how do you define good writing? I mean, you could talk about the sort of the proper constructs and sort of development, but is that all?
I don't know, and
Yeah.
that's one of the questions you have
That's a
to
great-
ask. So, I mean, and this is sort of what we start with in teacher education is, okay, you want them to, like, so if you want to have a good writer, what is it that makes that now, you know, and we'll get to it in a second, but then how do you measure it, you know? So, yeah, so absolutely, definitely writing. Anything else that comes to mind that you think would be important, like Paula?
Well, in music, we had to demonstrate our skill with recitals. We had to pass proficiency exams. So, and then I did do student teaching in a course in music. So all those same skills that you need for teachers in elementary, you need the same skills, communication and writing and clarity of thought.
So even though you're a music major, things like being able to express thought and to be able to show others how to do it is important.
Absolutely, music
Okay.
is totally about communication.
and I think this starts to get at the whole idea of, you know, one of my favorite expressions is just because I sing in the shower doesn't make me a rock star. So just because I can write well, do I get this degree? Really, what is that measure of competency? Is it a test? Is it a grade? Is it a performance assessment? Is it some sort of a demonstration of your ability to do that? Because just being able to write doesn't necessarily prepare you for whatever it is that you're going to go out and do. And I think that leads us a little bit into, you want to talk about that and we'll go to the next?
Yeah, if you go back for just
Sure.
1 second, just because these were the things that we looked at, and you guys hit on a lot of things, because there's some things that there's knowledge you should know. There's specific, you know, theories they should know. They should know how to write lesson plans. We have specific actual like knowledge base, but it's more than that. If you think about like teachers, like for a second, you know, you
Right.
tell me what would make a good teacher. You all had teachers in your world.
Creativity.
Yeah.
Problem solving.
And that's something it's not a knowledge, it's not something in a textbook, it's something that you'd likely have to demonstrate. So creativity. Anything, what else makes good teachers?
Mastery of skills,
How, like,
mastery of content area.
so
Right.
they need to know their content for sure, because you can't really teach it well if you don't yourself understand it, right? There's also too this piece at the bottom. I think attitude's also important. Like a term that I think, with itness and grit are terms that get tossed around in teacher education. It's the ability to read a room and make a decision without anything being said, but just by the way a kid is behaving or you see conversation going on, you have a sense of what needs to be done. You need to be able to think on your feet. And you also need to be able to persevere, because not every day is going to be an easy one. Any of us knows that we'll have that day, you'll have that third grader that is just not complying, and then you've got to figure out what you can do. So for us, that's kind of where we started. What was it that was like really critical? All right, and then if you go to the next slide, what I showed here is what we wound up with. These are our mission and goals for the teacher education program, all right? And this is something I think every program on campus really needs to think about, because your mission should say what it is you intend to do with your graduates. What do you want them to be able to do when they leave here? All right, so for us, we want them to be competent. And you can see a lot of the things we mentioned are there. So things like they need to be competent in both subject matter and pedagogical skills, you mentioned that, as well as caring practitioners in diverse, technologically rich environments. So we want them to be Are they knowledgeable? We want them to be able to perform teaching tasks, and we want them to be able to do it in ways that's caring and understand the environment they're in.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, sure.
Part of that is going beyond what we do in our classrooms, and it's that demonstration of the application of the knowledge, and it's the theory to practice, and we do that in all of our classes. We have the theory, we teach the theory, but then by providing the fieldwork experiences, the students have to go out and then practice and demonstrate that, and that's another way that we measure that competency.
Right, and so one of the things to consider, and maybe this is not necessary for everybody here, because some of you guys are School of Education, but say you're an English major here, there needs to be a conversation about what are the skills, what is the knowledge base, what are the competencies, like you talked about it, like writing. Writing's not, I'm a math person, so I'll have a hard time describing it, but the writing piece, there's so much to writing and being able to be expressive, and there's things in there that are sort of, I don't know, they're underlying abilities, but they're not necessarily something you can do on a multiple choice test, let's say. So one of the things that programs need to consider are what are those pieces? So, what are those actuals? If you had to give 5 things were absolutely critical. For us, it turned out to be 4 pieces. And these align actually to standards. So one of the things that we suggest doing is to look at your field for what, because there's definitely something out there. So whatever association it is, there's typically things for careers that they say are like absolutely essential to be successful in that environment, okay? Like business, like Jung, you said you were in business, right? Or who was, you were business, I'm sorry. So business was your background. Like what's something that you feel like someone that is in business needs to be able to do? Like in their field that might come up?
The others who are not in business, they need to do.
Well, no, if you expected, so you have a business degree and you're hired, what would be a competency you would expect of someone who has a degree in business?
Would be probably more experiences with different kind of business situations.
Okay.
So maybe being able to think on their feet. So if given a situation, they would know how to handle it, okay? So, that's where, you want to think about that. So it might be flexibility to handle, different situations, be able to determine the correct path given a difficult situation, whatever it is. So, you want to think about what those pieces are. For us, we broke them down into pieces. We have, one of the biggest ones is obviously competency in their field. So whatever they're going to teach, no question, the knowledge base is essential. So we have that as our first piece. Our second one is, it basically is pedagogical knowledge. It's the ability to plan, instruct, assess, and know all the ways to do that. So that is another big piece, and that's one of our goals. Another one, and this is the one that's it's not as tangible as some of the others, it's being able to handle diverse environments and knowing how to work with all different types of children. So, and we tried, one of the things that's really hard is coming up with a phrase that really captures everything. And this is something I would say if you've not done as a program, I think it's really important because it helps you, because things like we actually, I don't know if you remember this, we struggled with what it meant to be, like we actually, how to recognize diverse needs of learners, but recognize isn't measurable, like you have to say. So we said recognize diverse needs of learner by establishing and then defined what it is. So one of the things you have to be careful, like you can say you want caring. We used to use the word caring, but it's hard to measure that. Like how do you measure caring? The truth is you measure caring by the responses the teachers give, the type of, the attitude they have. So, you want to be careful when you state these things. So for us, we felt it was important to have a positive learning environment, varied strategies, because the more you vary strategies, the more you're going to meet the needs of all your learners. So we sort of defined it a little bit. And also, same thing, professional. We can say we want people to be professional, but you need to say what it is. So for our goal, we said that it was to, by engaging in self-reflective practices and collaboration, so being able to work together with other people and being able to reflect on your own instruction and be able to think about what I could do differently next time. So, and actually the sheets you guys have, so the pink sheet. Now, like I said, we have some ringers in the room that actually could cheat off of our slide. But I actually prepared the pink sheet, and this is why, because we weren't sure if every program actually has a program mission and goals. It is the absolute first step. You've got to know what it is you expect at the end. So you start with that end in mind, and then we'll talk about how you can work that backwards to eventually come to where we are, which is the measures that we use for our program.
I just want to add that as much as we talk about knowledge of content, that there is this piece that in our program we call dispositions, those professional dispositions. So it's not just being able to know your content, but being able to represent yourself in a professional manner and understand that that is what is expected of you within whatever environment you're going to be working in.
Yep. Okay. So, and I did mention this, so I wanted to just show them to you. They're not, and actually you'll find we have a packet for you. You don't have to look at it now. It was really just more informational to bring back as you start thinking about what you would do for your program. For us, we use the standards. There are many standards already out there. These are sort of the golden standards for us. There are lots of them. This one is our state standards, New Jersey Professional Standards for Teachers. So my guess is no matter what your field is, there are going to be standards that state what it is that, you know, whether it's journalism or business or French, that there's going to be standards that relate to what's expected of someone that has that background. So for us, we use the Professional Standards for Teachers. And it's basically what students are able, teachers should know and be able to do. And that aligns directly, not a big surprise, to InTask. InTask are the national set of teaching standards. And the honest truth is if you look at the New Jersey Professional Standards and InTask, they're very similar. And there's general themes. So actually, once we looked at them, and actually we have people in the room that physically did this, when you look at them, what happens is we sort of saw trends within them, and that's how we started to figure out how to lay out our mission and goals. So the mission and goals you saw came as a result of this, along with some of our personal pieces that we felt were important. So, and the other piece here that I think is worth mentioning for us, and this depends on the field, but for education, we want to make sure our students are definitely competent for what they're prepared for. And one of the things, they will be evaluated as teachers out in the field. There is an evaluation process each year to determine their competency. So this is one of the state models that's approved for evaluating teachers. It's actually used by probably about 60% of our school districts in the state of New Jersey. There are several of them. They all have the same kind of layout and feel. It's how you implement them that's a little bit different, but generally speaking, it actually provides a rubric, a full rubric of what's expected in each of the major categories. And Meg kind of touched on them. There are things like their ability to plan, dealing with the classroom environment, instruction, and professional responsibilities. So it all ties in together. So we actually decided that we wanted to use an instrument that actually eventually is what they're going to be measured with for competency as a teacher. So that's kind of where our mission and goals came from.
And I would think that if your program is looking at how you're going to look at measuring competency, that you would want to start with looking at your standards and really familiarizing yourself with the language and being able to pull from that language to create the claims. And that's how we have it laid out on the worksheet, to begin to create the claims, which then you work to how you'll measure that. But
if you go
I'm
one more,
getting
I don't know
myself
if I put it
a
on there.
little bit.
Yeah, that's okay.
So the next question is, if you've created these claims, if you have these standards within your programs, how do you measure? How do you then look at what's done across your courses that's going to measure that in a way that is fair and equitable to everybody? So it's not just Dr. So-and-so does it this way and somebody else does it another way. It's we have to have this, this consistency within the program. So we talk about are course grades enough? Do course grades truly reflect what you want your students to know and to be able to do out in the field? And so the first question to me is, are you comfortable with that? Probably not, because everybody grades differently. Maybe everybody has different assignments or others, so that's the next part of putting this together.
Yeah, I mean, before we go with that, I mean, and this is one thing, I mean, what would you think the number one way we measure competency in a higher education environment? Tests and course grades. Now, and if you think about that, does that truly measure all that competence is? Right? Like, does doing well on a test mean that you're going to perform well in the career path you choose? Yeah, and everyone's going no, okay? So, and course grades, I want to warn you on course grades. Like, I don't know, do you guys know the reasons why course grades are not a good idea? Like, what happens? Oh yeah, Claudine's like that. Go ahead, please.
From validity for the first part of it, what you're really looking at, if it's just competency, that's not a valid overlay. There's certainly, you can fit competency in there.
Yeah.
But as a valid indicator, you have to sort through all of the other things that course grades.
That's it. So that's what I want to get to. Because if you think about it, yeah, course grades, yeah.
And then
So
the reliability, like Meg said, it's different people, different.
right. Because you can say, because I mean, you can say what an A is, but do you guys, I mean, things like do you grade, do you allow, is part of your grade participation? Is part of your grade attending?
Homework.
Homework, okay? But is that measuring competency? See what I'm saying? And then the other thing is, how many sections of like intro to psychology do we have? Are they all identical? Can you be sure that no matter what section they take, that they're all having the same consistent piece of information?
Everybody's shaking.
Everybody's
I
going.
have to say that to the everybody's sitting here
Yeah.
shaking their head.
Okay, so
no,
so
more,
you know,
more,
all right.
no.
So the message we wanted to send with, and the honest truth is, in teacher education, written in the course grades aren't enough, and we have accreditation standards that they sort of, and for good reason. You can't just use tests and things like that to measure competency. There's so many more things that go into the career, at least for teaching, that are really important. And I think, honestly, it'd be hard to say that's not true for every major on campus. There's always something beyond just the knowledge base that's really important. So one of the things to think about is, how can you be sure it's there? And it's there across all of the programs, all your graduates, that they consistently have a certain level. And we don't expect them all to be superstars, but to have some level of competency that they can go forward and be successful. So that's kind of where we want to have some conversation. A lot of you guys are in School of Education, but and course grades, like you said, tests. And by the way, teacher education, we do have some tests. You may know a few tests. You know the tests that were required. Like I said, ringers in the room, so you're not allowed to speak. But tests that we do are, and they're required. It's not like we have an option, but you may be familiar with Praxis Core. That's to get into our program. Praxis 2. That's a measure of content knowledge, all right? So we do have some of those things, but I think it goes back to what Claudine said. It's, you know, the content's important, it's a piece of it, but there's more to it, so you have to be very careful and think about what tools you need, all right? So what we decided to do is actually go through some of our tools to give you a sense of how we went about measuring competency beyond the course grades themselves. So do you want to talk a little bit about
I do.
Okay.
This.
It's all you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is what we call a backward design in learning, and that's sort of starting at the end and then moving your way back to the process. So we start first with identifying your core competency. So what is it, again, that your students need to know and be able to do before they can graduate from your program? What do you want them to know and be able to do? That automatically leads to what expectations do you have in each course. So if we want all psych majors, I like that example, we want all psychology majors to have these competencies. These are the things that we think they need to know in their career. These are the expectations we have. That becomes the claims, the standards, the claims. And then we move to, how do you design evidence of these claims? This is where we have spent a significant amount of time creating program-based assignments that we think students who will succeed in these assignments will be that their assignments will reflect their competency in these areas. And in the 3 semesters in our program, we have several of these signature assignments within each one to demonstrate what they do. But the idea is to look at where you want to go, figure out how you want to get there, and then what you're going to use, what instruments, what tools that you will use to get yourself.
Before you move
Go
on,
ahead.
with the expectations, one of the things that you do have to look at, like for teacher education, we have a set of courses that we require for our majors. So we actually started with those. Like, these were the non-negotiable, you must take these with us, you can't transfer them in. Like, they're really pretty critical. They're all of our like practices and techniques, our methods of blank, our fieldwork courses. So we actually started with those courses because those are the ones that we will hope, I mean, it's what our intent is, to prepare them to teach. So we started with those. So if you're in a program like we use psychology for an example, probably the best place to go is to the core courses, the classes all students are required to take, right? Particularly when they get towards junior and senior level. Like Intro to Psychology is a very broad sort of foundational course, would be my guess. Like, we have foundation course like Diversity in Family, Schools, and Communities. We have educating students with special needs. They're sort of foundations, getting them prepared. But we have some pieces that we feel like are absolutely critical. We spend a lot of time on them at the end. So it's the thesis classes, it's things like that. Those are the ones that I would say, and that's where you talked about, and I wanted to mention. So when you're thinking about it, look at the courses that are core to your program. The likelihood is you can find the measures you need in there.
Or create the measures
Or
you
create
need
them. We
if
created
they're not,
some,
if they
yeah.
don't exist.
Yeah. So one of the things, and I gave you a chart, it's amazing. Actually, when I listed it, I went, wow, we do all this stuff? That's right, we do. So this table, believe it or not, this is what we do in teacher education now. I will say that we have a hand behind the scenes ensuring we do this because we're an accredited program. But I think it's a valuable thing to do because what we do is we looked, like Megan said, we have each of our things that we claim, that they're knowledgeable in their content, they know how to teach, they can work in diverse environments, and that they're professionals, right? So what we did with each of the categories is we actually determined measures. Now, I'm going to go through some of the categories to give you a sense of them, and it's not to say that you'll do this exactly like how we do, but it helps you think about, I'll talk about some of the things we did and why we did them. And you'll notice the course grades are on there. Certainly those courses wouldn't be required if we didn't feel that there was some essential information in there. So course grades are definitely part of it. But the issue is, it's, the question that I asked you guys, is it enough? The answer is, I doubt it, right? There's a lot more to knowing if someone's competent in what they do. So if you go to the next slide, I think I have some of the examples. Yeah. So I kind of call these traditional measures of competency. And these are traditional for our program. I mentioned them. And you may have them. I don't know, in your fields, did you guys have some traditional, like, I know you did, Paula. You said for music you had like actual tests you need to take, like, so you actually were tested on like a piece, like sight reading or something like that? Okay.
What about journalism?
Yeah, like did you have any like actual like official like tests that you had to take? Other than course level?
Yeah, no, other than in courses, like in certain courses, it was, sort of designing like, newspaper pages back in the old days, so it was.
But was it within the course or was it like a
within the
separate
course.
senior thing?
Yeah. So
Okay.
there's no separate.
But I would say, go ahead.
I was actually thinking about that at the beginning, right? Because we're talking about career track programs, right?
Right.
So we're thinking about
Yeah.
program competence and dispositional like qualities, right? But how would that change for some of the liberal arts
Yeah.
programs here on campus?
I don't know. And
Journalism or
yeah. I mean, and one of the things, and I think it kind of links into like essential learning outcomes sort of comes to mind. Yeah.
But I also think that the idea is to have a common thread that runs through those courses. So even though you're graduating with a degree in liberal arts, each of those areas should have a common measure of competency within that. And that's what helps you to ensure that regardless of the path that you took, when you get to the end of, with these signature courses, that you have that measure of competency that's consistent across all the courses.
Right.
That's a great question.
The yellow is definitely playing into that.
Yeah, and
Yes,
that can,
we
and
were-
that
we-
can be a tool, particularly for liberal arts. Like we have so many measures that we can use, and you'll see, and we have a lot of standards already out there that can help. But I think the essential learning outcomes can be really beneficial because program competence is one of them. I won't remember them all off the top of my head. But there's global. I know there's one on globalism. There's one on creativity, critical thinking, right? So those are those sort of not as tangible pieces, but that are absolutely important to be successful as a college graduate.
And I think they can be weaved into the standards too, into the claims.
Yeah.
You can absolutely rely or lean a little bit on the ELOs. We actually had a conversation about including ELOs in the presentation, and
It was a lot.
It was a lot, yeah.
We figured it was overkill for now, so that's part 2. Oh, so, okay. But anyway, so these are some of our traditional measures. And what we recognize in teaching, and obviously what our accrediting body recognizes, is that that's not enough to measure, okay? Course grades work, tests have some, they have some value to at least like some basic competency in your content, okay? But it doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna teach mathematics well because you can pass a math test, okay? So then, so the next piece, if you wanna go forward to the next one, we started doing, so for us, teaching, a lot of it is performance. So we do a lot of performance-based pieces, performance-related pieces. I just showed some samplings, and if anyone's curious about them, you simply need to ask me, and I didn't want to give you a bunch of papers, but things we do like fieldwork feedback forms, those are really important because part of our courses is going out into the field and working with actual cooperating teachers in K-12 classrooms. So we get information back on how are they doing. Like we're teaching them in class and everything's looking great, but how's it working with like live third graders? Is it, how are things working? So we do fieldwork feedback forms with each of our experiences, and our teachers keep an eye on that, our instructors. We also have student teaching, and I call them artifacts, but student teaching is by far the most important. We have 2 semesters leading up to, so we do a fieldwork and some courses on campus in introductory. We do additional coursework and another fieldwork experience, and it's kind of building towards that student teaching, that final experience as a daily teacher in the room. So we also have documents at that point, and I put a little note on there. If you look on the top right, that's that framework that we use. That's the teacher evaluation model the state of New Jersey uses to measure teachers' ability. It's a rubric based on different categories, and we actually align that. So we teach about it in our program, and we actually measure them with it. So our fieldwork forms and our student teaching, everything is all aligned to the standards and the framework that we use. So again, it's why you start with what defines competency, and all of that can help you determine what tools are best for your program.
And I think the fieldwork feedback form, very representative of measuring disposition. So what are those professional dispositions that we're looking for in our graduates? And so getting feedback from the cooperating teachers and from our clinical supervisors gives us that piece that's also part of this picture that we're creating.
Yeah, and we ask questions about all the claims. So on the fieldwork form, we make sure we ask how are they doing teaching the content? How are they doing with pedagogical strategies? Are they able to vary? And also, how
do they show up on time?
Do they show up on
professionally
time?
dressed?
Are they dressed professionally? Are they, do they communicate well with children? All those types of things. So they're like indicators. So yeah, it's all blended in.
Right.
Yep. And then another piece, and actually this one, yeah, go ahead. Question?
Sorry.
Sure.
Is that framework, is that online?
Danielson framework?
Yes.
All you have to do is literally Google Danielson framework, and you'll find it. Yep. So the other thing we do, and actually this one's probably an easy one to do, is student perceptions are important. Now, keeping in mind they are perceptions. It's how they perceive themselves. So in and of itself, you can't assume on an exit survey if they feel prepared, they really are, okay? But we would hope they would feel as if, all right? It's definitely an indicator of competency. So one of the things we make sure we do is we ask our students, how prepared are you in the following areas? And we literally have an exit survey, and not a big surprise, directly aligned to our standards. So we set our standards, we know what we hope they will experience in our program, and then we ask them on, on a Likert scale, strongly agree to strongly disagree. How well do you feel you are to, work with children whose first language isn't English, to deal with difficult children, whatever it is. So we have all of those things in the exit survey, and then we use that data. That's another piece of information for us to know how well we're doing. And we look at it on a regular basis in our program. And like I said, this one's an easy one because it's really just asking your students, they're your audience. We actually attach it to our student teaching at the end, so they must do it. And then we, process them for graduation. So it's an easy way to get information from them. And it's really, really helpful.
But we've also just recently taken some of that feedback that we've gotten from these surveys and used that to go back and take a look at how we're teaching and what we're teaching within the sequence of the 3 semesters to make sure that we are doing, because if 5 or 6 students say the same thing, then we have to really revisit how we're addressing this in each of the courses. So it's really good feedback for us to be able to make sure that we're preparing our students as best we can.
So in a program like, a liberal arts where it may not be as easy, like I would say psychology can be very difficult if we've used that as an example, because there's just so many fields you can go into with a degree in psychology, but I'm sure there's some specific types of skills or abilities you would expect. So, or you can even use ELOs. You might ask students, how well do you feel you are to that you're able to think creatively and come up with new ideas when they're not given to you? Can you problem solve when you're, in a difficult situation? Obviously apply them to the field. But you can ask those kind of questions. And if you get 20 or 30% of your audience saying, no, I don't feel prepared, that should tell you something, okay? And like you said, what you alluded to, that's what we've been using as a tool. Probably everything we've done over the last, I'd say at least 6 or 7 years, a lot of it has been a result of listening to what the students have said, that we feel like they feel like they're very good. They feel like their knowledge base is good. They feel like their teaching skills are good. But we had some work to do in the area of diversity, so it's why we have faculty fellows this year, because students did not feel like they could handle all the types of children in the room, or at least they felt like there was more to be learned. So we've used that as a tool.
I was shouting out.
Yeah, and that was it.
Faculty fellows.
Our fellows here. That wasn't on purpose. It just kind of, it's true, right? That's how we got fellows, is we found out that was something we need to work on.
This really gets to the heart and soul of what we're doing in our program, and a lot of this is coming from new state mandates that are requiring us to evaluate our teachers, or I should say that the state is requiring our teachers to be evaluated. That's a much more of an active statement, I guess. Beginning, yeah. beginning September 2017. So, in addition to all of these other things we've done to audit our program, we've now had to go back and look at this.
I'm going to stop you for 1 second, though, so they know what it is, if that's okay. Because we haven't used those 5 letters yet.
You go ahead.
EdTPA. Yes, okay. So I should probably mention this now, the School of Ed in the room. You may already know this a little bit. And Peter, you found out yesterday in a meeting in the afternoon about this. So on top of some of the measures, we obviously have Praxis Core and Praxis 2. The state has, and this has happened in several states, we're actually kind of further, I think there's like 20 states maybe that have adopted it, 22, somewhere around there. But basically EdTPA is a performance-based assessment. So we have students take, right now the state only requires, obviously, complete your teacher ed program as designed, check, okay? They have to do at entry a 3.0, and they have to have their Praxis Core, and they must pass Praxis 2. And then they student teach. We deem them successful through our measure, and off they go into the world of teaching. But now what is happening is there is an additional measure, because sometimes there's tests there and student teaching, but then sometimes the students are still, the teachers aren't necessarily successful when they get out there. So now they want a performance-based assessment, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's performance-based. During student teaching, they must complete a portfolio-style assessment. And it literally tracks, and I will be honest, I'd like it to be free, but it measures the things we teach. It measures planning, the ability to plan. And then once you plan it, this is shocking, teach it. Right, instruct it, and then assess how it went in the classroom with the actual children. All right, so the actual portfolio assessment sounds like something we do in teaching. That's what we do. We teach them how to plan, instruct, assess, work with children, reflect on their practice. That's what EdTPA is designed to do.
I want to make sure that we address Paula's concern about the video. Where does the video fit into this? And one of the tasks is for students after they've planned for a lesson or learning segment that they have to also videotape themselves doing what it is that they planned. They said that they were going to do to give some evidence that that there is this full cycle of planning, instruction, and assessment. And so these pieces are incorporated into the 10 minutes video that they have to include. Not a bad idea to show that, and we've talked about how other programs could use that, and I don't really know because my whole world is teacher education, but I think that showing that performance, being able to demonstrate that is a really good signature way of having that competency throughout your program.
Right, and I think, so just to know what it is, but the performance assessment kind of speaks to the need to measure beyond course grades and GPA. That's exactly what EdTPA is looking for. They want teachers who can perform on their feet. So that same idea can be relevant to other programs. So for us, now we actually were already on this path before EdTPA came along. We realized course grades are not necessarily a good measure of a student's ability. So we created this, which is, we call it a working portfolio. It's literally just a digital portfolio. We put it in TaskStream, but we use Blackboard here. You can know that there's portfolio systems in Blackboard. There's lots of them. And what we did was to get beyond the course grades, to make sure not only does that A, because an A means they must be great, but we want to make sure that the content that they create or do in there also reflects some competencies as well. So here you'll see all the courses. We actually took all of those core courses I talked about, so whatever the core courses in your program, you might consider what would they be. And we literally picked a specific assignment in each course that we referred to as signature, a piece that defines and can represent what they really should be able to accomplish as a result of the course. All right?
And at the very basic level, again, for programs that maybe don't have this or are considering how to do this, this is a great first step. If you go through your standards and you have your claims, the next thing is, how do we measure that? Well, the first thing would be to have the same assignments throughout every course so that every student is being exposed to the same thing and has the same expectation for them. And we've gone through each of our courses, our signature courses, and created these assignments to make sure that our students have that consistency.
Right, and actually you brought up a good point too. One of the biggest things is remember that you may have multiple sections of courses. So it doesn't mean, because one of the things that's automatically is, whoa, does that mean we all have to teach exactly the same way? No, that's not necessarily true. But there are some sets, a body of knowledge and information that must be captured. So that's why we have a signature assignment, a piece. So there's other things, and you can certainly put your personal spin on how you instruct classes, but if they're all going to take, the thesis class, what piece represents what truly is competency for that? that might be your signature for what you decided.
And then the next step in that is if you have created the assignments that every student will complete, where's the reliability in grading, the inter-rater reliability?
Oh, and
and
that
so
leads-
so that's why my colleagues have worked diligently on creating a rubric that we can use for all of the assignments
And I
so
think
that
it's on
we
the
know.
next slide, I think. Is it there?
Look
Yes.
at that.
Okay, woo, okay, yeah. So this is the next step. So once you have signature assignments, then, you know, you have to find a way to, how do you evaluate them? Like, do you say great, you know, excellent, great, you know, it's very difficult. So one of the best ways to do this, and this is sort of where ELOs has gone a little bit, is to have some rubrics to give some sense of like what levels, like different levels. So here's a level 1, level 5 is the highest. Where do you want them to be and what do you expect at each level? So that's what we've been working on. And again, no big surprise, aligned to our standards so that we know that we're still hitting our standards. And then what we're trying to do actually is we called it a shared rubric. So it's across courses. So it's consistent. We're always measuring it the same way. And the signatures eventually, like right now we're still working on it. It's a work in progress. This is definitely going to take time. But we created signatures, we're getting them submitted, and now we're at the point where we're building a rubric and then we're going to try it out. And then the idea is eventually like maybe, you know, we're teaching a course, but we may have 3 colleagues that don't know anything that was done, and then they'll look at that assignment and, you know, and say they're all level 3, and if that's the case, then we're good. If that's what proficiency is, then they're where they should be. So it helps guide.
At the end, the idea is that at the end of the program, we have a portfolio on every student in our program in TaskStream that has the upload of every one of these signature assignments so that you can see however 50, 75 students every semester have created this portfolio. We have that evidence that we can say, yes, our students are prepared, yes, they are competent, knowledgeable, whatever, and here is the evidence that we have that's consistent throughout all of our courses.
Yeah, and we also,
All of our
too, I should
sections, I
mention,
should
it's
say.
also an advising tool because, you know, people will say they want to be a teacher, but there are some things you must be able to know and do in order to be successful in it. So, you know, along the way, it's helpful to have pieces to say, listen, you're doing pretty well with your coursework, but I'm seeing you're having a problem out in the field. You know, maybe those are signatures. Some of those signatures can actually serve as a time to talk to students. It's also a nice development tool, so it doesn't mean we would stop them from our program, but eventually the idea would be that we can use those and continue to revisit them, and they can be used so students know, wow, I'm getting like a 3 out of 5, I'm on my way. They're getting a 2 out of 5, probably have some work to do, right? And then maybe they come to one of us to ask what I can do to work on it a little bit more. So it can really be a useful tool for this developmental tool. So it's not just something that we use at the end to measure, but it also is helpful to the students to help them know where they are and sort of self-regulate through the program as well. So, I mean, and this is sort of the message we wanna sort of leave you with. So for us, I mean, you heard a lot, and actually, so you know what is in the handout. I gave you all of our measures. We actually have lots. We didn't cover all of them, I don't think, but there's definitely a lot of them there. So I gave you a list of every measure, and I described it because it's complicated. We have a lot of measures and weird little names for them, but like our exit survey is for students, we have alumni surveys, we have the fieldwork forms, we have EdTPA, we have Praxis, all of those. So I described all of our different tools that we use and showed you how we lay them out in the hopes that other programs might be able to use that to help sort of inform their practice and where they might want to go. And I do think a good place to start, particularly like for us, we're a professional, we're in a professional area, so it's a little, I think it's defined a bit more, where if you're going, and there's other degrees where if you get a degree, there's a lot of paths. Like if you have a degree in English, there are so many things you can do, you know what I mean? So you'd have to think about what are the actual skill set that's really essential, that so no matter what path is picked, they're going to be successful. And then thinking about what pieces you could use.
But like you said, to go through the core courses.
Yeah,
What
start with the core.
are the core courses in your program? Okay. What are the competencies that we would expect all of our students to know at the end of these courses? Okay. How do we get there? How do we measure that? And that, to me, yes, we have a lot in our program, but I think very simply in other programs, you could start with that. Look at your standards, look at what you want your students to know and be able to do, and then work back from there and create the assignments. Something as simple, dare I say that, as a rubric. Rubrics aren't necessarily simple, but as a way of, here's an assignment that we want, that we've created for this course. Here's a rubric that we can use. Here's, in the next course, here's another one. That's a real simple way of having that continuity to measure competency throughout your program.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity to
Thank
come and
you.
do this this afternoon.